Recording in progress. Thank you. Because we are just about here at the bottom of the hour, and so we want to get started up. Hopefully you can see that fine, Craig.
I can. I've never seen this movie. This is by Pixar, right?
Yes, Inside Out.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I heard it was really good, though.
Yeah, there's some parts to it that are fun. Like Bingo Bongo there is the little character that her childhood make-believe friend is kind of fun. All right, so let's get started up here because we're all fired up for tonight. So welcome to another session, another webinar of Think with a Drink. It's the weekly webinar series brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. And tonight we're doing handling or dealing with financial stress. What Craig and I like to always talk about is, trying to take the emotion out of dealing with your money, because there are all sorts of emotions, and we'll talk about that go along with handling finances and dealing with your money. Before we get into that, however, what happened there? Why is that not moving? Oh, there we go. Okay, boy, all sorts of confusion for me tonight with technology. All right, little checklist before we get started here this evening. So the event is being recorded, but just know that all that's being recorded is what's being shown on the screen. Your microphones are muted. The cameras are irrelevant because they're not shown on the screen. However, there is a chat box. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat box. I'll introduce my co-pilot in a second, but he's here to keep me on pace, but also to make sure if we do have any questions or anything, that the chat box gets looked at and those questions do get fielded.
So does that mean that if people are seeing this on YouTube, they can't see these great Red Sox jerseys we've got on right now?
They can see us.
Oh, they can't.
Yeah, they can see us. They can't see the rest. Everybody else is blocked out.
Oh, okay. All
right. That's what happens.
All right.
All right. So, just to introduce us, your presenters for this evening. I'm Tom Alessi. I'm the president of the Aries Foundation. I have been in financial services, and I'm going into my 23rd year now in financial services. I'm an investment advisor. It means I act as a fiduciary. Whenever giving guidance or advice to any of my clients, I'd like to bring in my co-pilot for this evening, our Vice President, Craig, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson, Vice President of the Aries Foundation. I've been in financial services about 17 years now. And I specialize in working with families and small businesses to help them come up with comprehensive financial plans so they can have a better future with their money.
Terrific. I don't know what happened right there. That was I'm having a wonderful tech. My whole day has just been like this, but that's okay. We'll roll with it and we'll keep going. Appreciate that, Craig. Craig will be joining us in and out as we go through the session this evening. Real quick, we told you it was brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. We're a nonprofit. We're located in Newton, Massachusetts. You can look at our website. It's www.ariesfoundation.org. Our mission is really what tonight is all about. Our mission is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money, because whether you realize it or not, you are in a relationship with your money. And just like every other personal relationship you have, there are behaviors and emotional triggers that can cause us to act sometimes, what Craig and I like to say is irrationally when dealing with our money and our finances. So our whole goal, and like this session is talking about, is trying to take some of that emotion out of dealing with your money. So these disclosures, I'm not going to go read the whole page for you, just to know we're a nonprofit, right? This is all meant to be purely educational, and it is really, the opinion of Craig and I as far as what we're doing. But the bottom line is, if you ever do need help, whether it's tax, legal, or financial, seek out the help of a professional. And now we get into the fun part, because we call this Think with a Drink, and tonight, there we go.
I feel like I got to go up and do a jig.
Now, so there are drinks on the flight. We call this Think with a Drink, and we're having a little fun because we both got our Sox jerseys on. Everything is Boston tonight. So if you're in another part of the country, oh, well, too bad, right? Because the Red Sox are in the ALDS tonight to open things off for the playoffs after trouncing the Yankees on Tuesday night. So we're doing all things Boston here tonight. And I'm going to be drinking this evening Shipping Out to Boston. The song I did play is Shipping Up to Boston for those fans of the Dropkick Murphys and the movie The Departed. That's Shipping Up to Boston. But Jack's Abbey does Shipping Out to Boston, and it's an amber ale, which goes nicely in the fall weather here. But really the goal for us with this is a lot of the information, like tonight, an emotional is, stress and all the stuff we're dealing with tonight, not really the greatest of subjects. So we think having something cold and refreshing to drink along with this as we go along is an easy way to do it so that we can keep this in a casual and relaxed manner. Craig, what are you drinking this evening?
Not that we're condoning self-medication, but yes. I'm actually drinking Angry Orchard.
You're drinking a what?
An Angry Orchard.
Angry Orchard. Okay. Is this
in order of the fall season being upon us? Yes.
Skål. Oh, that is so good. Oh. Okay, so the agenda for this evening, we're going to talk about money stress, like what causes it, who's more stressed, than others, who and why with that. Identify some of the causes, some of the things to be thinking about in terms of when it comes to money and stress, and then steps that you can take to try to combat it, battle it, hold it back or get it under control, right? Ways to overcome that money stress. All right, so we're going to start with, money problems on a whole, right? So let's face it, everybody's stressed out. They're not only financially stressed, but certainly the past year and a half, the whole pandemic, the quarantine, all of that just added to that. So I think, Craig, would you agree that it's like more focus on the financial aspect of people's lives now because of that?
Well, yeah, I think because, especially, going through COVID and, not being certain, am I going to be able to keep working? Are things going to be shut down? Is there going to be, supply line chain issues? Is the market going to crumble? I mean, lots of restaurants were closed. A lot of people were out of work. So I think there was a lot of additional stress the last 2 years. And then on top of it, people were stuck in their homes. So given lots of stress and lots of time to think about it. So and not a good combination.
Right, and to follow up on that, I know one of the things was what was Capital One, right? They're the what's in your wallet people, right? Capital One, they have this card. It's called Credit Wise, but they did a survey. 73% of the population that responded, right? 73% of the people in the survey ranked money, finances, as their number one stress concern in their life right now. There's a 2021 survey. Right. And like you said, on top of the quarantine, stress is a health thing. We're going to talk about that as well. And that health concern can drag you down.
Well, what's this say that liquor stores were considered an essential service during COVID?
Well, yeah, things with the
drink. Some stress?
Right. So we went right with that. It was an essential service. Absolutely. Right. In terms of going through there.
I think when the drink started during COVID. So
yeah. All right, so who's getting most affected, right? So right now, we're sort of going off basically some other surveys that have been done, but this is that same Capital One survey. And basically what they found was that really the younger generation, certainly Gen Z and millennials, where we said that 73% of the respondents, right, that was the number that said that financial was it. For this generation, it's over 80%. The younger generation, over 80% of the respondents said that the money, financial, that's my number one stress concern right now. And, one part of that is besides that, they're usually the ones that are let's face it, if we're cutting back on a workforce, they're going to be the first ones that are going to get the furlough or the lack of hours or let go. And two, they're more than likely carrying student debt.
Or three, they also have less reserve, right?
Right.
They don't have as much time to put money away.
That's the next part of this, right? So you think that Craig knew what was coming, right, in terms of dealing with that. But that's the other part of it is that, people are not prepared to deal with this. This was a I got this from PricewaterhouseCoopers, that PricewaterhouseCoopers found that of their employer survey that they sent out, you know, all the employees that are in all of these corporations, 38% of the respondents said they had less than $1,000 if they had to deal with something, right? So less than $1,000 to deal with.
That's not a surprise.
Oh, and that number for the Gen Z folks jumps to the 60% range.
Right. Yeah, well, that's not a surprise. I mean, statistics as a whole for people in this country with savings is negative $2,000. Because most people have more debt than they have savings. Yeah. So when you do the average out, yeah, it's not a surprise.
And so it's that, you know, and that's going to sort of come in when we talk about this, you know, and ways to battle this, you know, ways to make, you know, we always talk about ways to make you feel better in terms of building up some of those reserves. And we'll get to that when we go through this. But that's really the reality here, is that you've got to be prepared, because who knows what's coming down the line. You know, so really the idea here is trying to identify the top sources of financial stress, right? If financial anxiety, right? That's anxiety. It doesn't sound right. Why does that sound so weird to say that?
Financial anxiety? I don't know.
You know, but basically, what's keeping you up at night? Let me do it that way. I think I'll get it there in terms of it. You know, it's sort of to try to figure that out. What is it? Is it credit cards? Is it the debt that you've amounted? Is it that, hey, I got to pay this bill and I don't have the money set aside for it? You know, it's sort of trying to determine where that is coming from. What's that stressor that's eating away at you, that's keeping you up at night? That's one of the first things to do here.
Okay. And I got a question from the audience here.
Okay.
What if I have more than one thing keeping me awake at night?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, right? So, you know, because for a lot of us, that is the case, right? I've got debt, I've got this other thing that's going, I've got my utilities or my rent or my mortgage that are going to get paid, you know, in terms of going through that. I think for us, Greg, when we try to tell that to people, it's more of identifying the bigger number, what that actual number one thing is. Yes, we have a whole bunch of little ones, but we want to focus on what's the one that's really driving it. And how can we sort of start looking at that as the thing? Or if there is just, you know, it's spread out over a course of a lot of different pieces, let's narrow that down. Let's pick one and get rid of it.
Yeah, because I think the issue is when you're dealing with financial stress, sometimes it can come on like an avalanche, right? If you don't have enough money, you don't have enough money. If bills are due and you don't have it to pay, you know, it's not one thing per se, it's the entire scenario. Yeah. So how do you keep swimming while you're trying to deal with, you know, when you feel like you're drowning in financial debt?
Well, right. And that's part of it. That's what I mean by, but it's finding, like, is it, well, okay, you know, let's use credit cards as it, right? So you got multiple things. Maybe you got student loan, maybe you got credit card debt, maybe you got some other things, but maybe it's like, okay, let's address one of those credit card debts and let's make that the focus, get that squared away, because it does a couple of things. Psychologically, it fixes you, you know, and says, okay, I can deal with this. And now I can move some of that money over to start dealing with something else. And we'll talk about that when we ways to handle the stuff. But that's the thing, is finding the real, you know, I understand it's easy to say, like Craig just mentioned, it's an avalanche, like, oh, it's way too much of this. But there's usually one driver. So find the one driver. All right, so, you know, like everybody deals with stress differently, right? And so, and, you know, this can be stress in general, right? But it's one of those things that happens because a lot of times people deal with stress by taking on unhealthy activities. And whether that's, turning to things like smoking or drinking or, all those vice things, right? Doing those type of things. But you also have people who emotionally overeat, right? Eating becomes that comfort thing for them. With money, with one of the things that Craig and I sort of try to work with everybody about is the emotional spending, right? You try, everything's going bad. I got to go out and buy something. I want to feel good, so I'm going to go out and buy something. And that's where we can get ourselves into problems. You got to sort of recognize in yourself, this is all a looking inward type of thing. Everybody is different. Everybody does it differently. If you're somebody who has a situation where it might be a gambling problem or gambling, that's another money spend that's going out there, right? So you got to sort of try to figure out, do I do that? Do I get down or feel a little bit in the depressed world? And am I then trying to buy something to lift my spirits or spend my way out of that?
And I've seen that very often, Tom, where people get into this like hamster wheel, right? They spend out, they get control, they pay down their credit cards, and then they go, well, now I deserve a reward to make me feel better. So they go out and they spend more money.
Right.
And they start the whole cycle all over again. They get out and then they get back in. It's no different than any other type of addiction, right? That's what makes you feel good. And it doesn't make you feel good long, right? It just makes you feel good for the moment. And then you need the next fix. And so that's the problem with, any type of addiction, even spending addiction, is because you're looking for the next fix. You're looking to feel a little bit better. Yep.
Right. And so but you've got to find, and that's where we talk about those behaviors, those emotional triggers, right? That's acting irrationally. That's where some of this comes in, where you've got to be taking a look and saying, does really make sense for me? Like, okay, I get, you've got, first off, you have to be able to, what do they say that with admit when you have that problem, right? That's the first thing, is this sort of owning up to the fact that this is what I do. A lot of us don't realize we do it. Right, we do it because, like Craig was alluding to, it makes us feel good, and so we're just doing it out of habit of doing it, but without realizing what's that doing to our bottom line and doing to us, and ultimately creating the stress that's going to come, that's going to get us into that to do it all over again.
And this is interesting, Tom. What I have found over the last 17 years of doing financial planning with people is everyone thinks money stress comes from a lack of money or lack of income. Sometimes it does, right, but it really is more or less an issue of lack of control, right? You're not managing your budget. You're not managing your ins and outs. And either you feel like you don't have the tools to do that, or you don't have the ability to do that. And that's where, like I said, I've seen people who make $500,000 a year financially stressed because they can't afford their bills. How could somebody who's making $500,000 a year not be able to afford their bills? Well, because they spent on this, they spent on that, and the needs become greater, and they try to keep up with it. Right. But I've seen people who make less than the poverty level living okay because they manage they manage their money, they manage their life style, and so they it's about managing. It's about getting control over the situation. That's right. What most.
But in this case, and that's absolutely true, and we'll talk about that when we get into some of those aspects of how to combat that stuff. But this is more of trying to, sort of in the outset, really, again, the Michael Jackson man in the mirror thing. You got to look inside and say, so I've got some of these behaviors. What do I do? The next time that stress happens, or the next time I get angst or worried or something, what am I going to turn to? And whatever the issue is, and whether it might be, something that's just unhealthy, whether it's smoking, drinking, or eating, or something that gets you into financial trouble, whatever it is, you've got to address it, because it's going to keep happening. And when it happens over and over again on the financial side, and if that's adding to your financial stress, it just compiles the whole thing.
Right. Sometimes financial stress is a symptom, like you're saying or alluding to, of something else bigger that has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
Right. Self-worth, what's going on in your family, how you feel about yourself, other factors that are going on you can't control, and that just seems to be something that becomes a side effect of.
Right. And that leads right into that, with stress, right? Because and specifically now, because we're talking about at a time where being healthy, right? Certainly from an onset of the COVID, right? The whole COVID world that we're in at this point, but anything that's taking away from our genuine health overview, which stress does, just opens the door for the, just an opportunity for that to sneak in, basically, is what it is, because stress takes a toll. And again, the stress in what we're talking about is financial stress. You know, there's other forms of stress, and that's other conversations. But, you know, like we talked about, money is the number one concern right now. Money is what's driving the stress. And if that stress is taken away from your health and the ability for your body to combat, you know, COVID or whatever the hell else is out there, it's a problem, right? And so, you know, you got to look, this is more about checking the warning signs, right? And really looking for, you know, you may not be feeling it right now, but these are some of the precursors, if you will, to that. Like Craig mentioned, you know, that whole idea of worrying about being able to pay for something, right? Whether it's I'm worried about money coming in, I'm worried about paying the bills. We talked about, hey, you know, the buying, you know, the what do they call that? Like spree, a shopping spree, right? That's,
shopping spree,
you know,
yeah.
Right. That type of thing. Like going on a spending spree. That's what I was looking for. You know, going on a spending spree where it's just, you know, not something that was planned or thought for. This is all becomes that, like we mentioned at the top of the start of this, that irrational behavior that occurs. And, you know, that leads into other stressors. You know, we didn't even get into, you know, like bill collectors, right? God bless you, start getting calls from the bill collectors, right? You know, there's a stressful situation for you, which can lead to, you know, panic attacks and things like that, where, you know, that's what's really, you know, starts, you know, building up, right? Like Craig talked about, you know, it just becomes this overall cycle that you get yourself into where, you know, I can't get out. Now I'm overwhelmed. And then that becomes completely just a daunting task. Like there's too much. I can't deal with this, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think the other thing too, and I think, you know, our parents back in the day had a little their handle on this part, is they wouldn't necessarily buy something till they could afford something. And we were kind of like the we deserve it now generation, right? I should have the house, I can take a big loan, I should have the big car now, I don't have to wait till I'm old, you know. I don't have to wait till I've accumulated all this money because I deserve it now. And then what happens is, like when we saw the whole housing market back before 2008, you know, they were giving people mortgages almost like, you know, giving out candy. They were barely even checking documentation to see if you could afford the house before they gave you the mortgage. Well, now all of a sudden, because you're
okay, I'm not going to get into the whole my take on that. Maybe we'll do that at some point. Maybe in the turn of the new year, we'll talk about that whole thing and what happened. And remember, the Fed was pushing that. So nothing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take you out of your thing.
No, that's absolutely fine.
No, the American dream. The whole idea is home ownership was pushed as the American ideal, the American dream.
Right, but the affordability issue wasn't pushed. Like I know I went for a mortgage.
Yeah, no. It was just that you should have a home. It was, yeah, that was not the issue. Like that, you know, that was the thing. There was a disconnect there between the ideal that the Federal Reserve Bank was pushing and what actually was being done out on Main Street.
Right, because I had a mortgage broker who said, you know, you can have this much house, and it was twice as much as what I knew I could afford for a mortgage payment. But that wasn't stopping them from issuing me the mortgage and giving me that mortgage. It just would have meant in 2 or 3 years I'd have been underwater and have been out of a house. And that's
and then you would have walked away, which is what happened.
That's what happened.
Walked away because there was nothing. You didn't have anything in the house. What did you care?
Right. So once again, the big thing is understanding, and I know you're going to get into solutions fairly shortly, but it's the control factor. You know, so they can give it to me. That means I need to take it. You can give me 10 candy bars.
Yeah,
it doesn't
but you also, you're right. You mentioned that as well. That whole I'm keeping up with the Joneses thing. We talk about that a lot when we get into, you know, some of the budget and cash flow stuff, like living within your means.
Right.
Like you said, you know, the whole idea of, yeah, okay, granted, you can have the McMansion, but you really need the McMansion? You know, it's only 3 of you. Why does everybody need 3 different rooms? Like, they made no, you know, that type of thing.
Right.
Which sleds right into the conversation of avoiding temptations.
But I like temptation.
Everybody likes temptation, right? That's the whole idea. Where I saw something on this, which I thought was very funny, you know. Don't worry about temptation as you get older. It'll avoid you, right? You know. So.
That's terrible. I guess that's right. Lack of opportunities, right?
But this gets to the you know, even if it's just something as innocent as like, hey, I tend to I'm not a shopaholic, but I tend to go on those make me feel good shopping sprees. right? Like when I get down. So maybe it's like realizing you need to avoid, going to the mall or whatever place you go to when you want to spend money or buy things, right? Find another alternative instead of that, right? And avoid those opportunities. We talk about this, when we talk about being a better saver and learning to spend efficiently or spend differently. One of the tips we always say is take 2 days a month and only spend whatever you have for cash. Now, I know in today's world, quarantine and everything, that a lot of places are contactless now, so they're not taking cash. But that type of idea where I'm only going to spend what's in my pocket. I'm not going to use the card to buy something because I'm going to limit what I'm going to be able to buy.
Right. And sometimes that feels like the punish myself routine. But the other thing I look at too is, if there's things you want to buy, you're going to buy them. The issue is, how do you feel about it on the other side? So if you have a budget that says I can spend XYZ amount of money every month, on certain, miscellaneous, whatever I want, that's in your budget. It's not killing your budget. You're not buying something as opposed to paying the phone bill. You're not buying something as opposed to not paying the mortgage, right? So it's got to be something. That's how you get control. Now you can reward yourself with those tempting things versus hurting yourself with those tempting things.
Right. But what we're talking about is, and that's absolutely true. But the other is getting into those stress situations that now spending is one of the ways I get myself out of feeling stressed.
Right. But I'm just saying that's the hamster wheel though, right? Once you get into that, then the stress keeps compounding because you're now adding to the bills because the money's not there. Like you said, gambling.
Right, but that's what I'm saying though, is to realize that, hey, staying up late at night in the home shopping network you're gonna be spending money there. Let's block that channel. Let's go someplace else, right? Do something else other than that. If you know that that's the trigger, don't whatever you do, block Amazon or whatever. God bless if they hear that. God, we get all sorts of.
I hope they do hear it. You know what? I'm doing Christmas last year. My wife goes, "Oh, you can buy that for the girls on Amazon." I go, "Well, yeah, but I got one card." No, it's already in there. Just hit the button and it's already paid for. Like, what? All I gotta do is hit buy now and it's done. Yup. Oh boy, can you separate me from my money any faster or easier?
Yes, exactly. And so it's those type of things that you need to really say, okay, I can't go online or I can't look for this because I'll fall prey to that. I'll fall victim to it. And that'll just compound and start that whole hamster wheel thing going all over again. Absolutely.
It's like the knife show, man. It's like 50 knives for $200. It's like $3 a piece. How can I not buy them?
Yeah, who doesn't need 50 knives? I gotta have it. And I get two then. It's always the wait. But wait, don't go in. All right. So ways to combat financial stress. And this is really more important than anything else in terms of this, right? So this is really what it comes down to in terms of going through it. And the first one is having that emergency reserve, having money available for when whatever happens, right? Like we talked about, 38% of the respondents had less than $1,000. You've got to set up an emergency reserve account. That should be the first thing, the first lesson. Craig and I have been on the soapbox and ringing this bell since last May that coming out of the quarantine, everybody needs to be building up their emergency reserve account. In fact, so much to the point, next week, that's what it's all on. The webinar next week is all on building up the emergency reserve account, where, how, what to do, how much should you have, all of that. But you've got to have it because that's the first place when that extraordinary thing happens, you can go to where you don't have to use plastic to pay for it. The second one is to have a debt reduction strategy. How am I going to pay down the debt, right? We talk about this. We've done, presentations on it, the different variations of this modeling and being able to do it. But if you find yourself in that situation where debt is becoming overwhelming, or you're really starting to feel stressed about the debt that you have and paying the bills, that's where you need to engage and to have that, look, here's how we can help you get a spend down strategy to reduce your debt. Because that's what you need to do. These go hand in hand, and we can show you how to make that happen. And then the last one in this is seeking professional help, right? So, seeking professional help, when we talk, we've already said, like, look, we do a lot of this, in terms of the emergency reserves and the debt reduction, reaching out in terms of going through that. But the idea is some of this stuff you really need to be thinking about from a grander scale than just, hey, what am I spending for debt?
I got a question in the chat box for you. I got, where can I get professional help?
Right. So if you're talking financial, right, that's where, Craig and I, we always say, come to us, come to the foundation. We'll try to help you out. We'll try to give you the guidance from there. If this is getting deeper, where we're talking about some of those behaviors that, are destructive or can be, detrimental, you might need to be seeking some counseling help. And in which case, again, from us, we have a lot of organizations that we're connected to that can help with that as well. If you're in one of those situations, whether it's, anything that can be from a bad behavior to one that's self-destructive, because that's what can happen, we can really get to a closed, almost like negative self-worth, depressed type of feeling when dealing with our money. And so we want to make sure that you're getting the right help with that. So I would suggest that if you're feeling that way, reach out. We can certainly try to help. We're not going to diagnose you. It's not what we do. But we can try to help you sort of guide through that and figure it out.
And one big thing too, I think, especially, more so for men still than women, is, a lot of the time you attach your self-worth to your earning power or your ability to provide for your family.
Yeah.
Right. So when all of a sudden you can't, whether that's through your fault, no fault of your own or not, you put that on yourself to, now I'm not worth as much. I'm not as good a person. And I think you got to step back with financial stress and try to put it in, what's the worst case scenario? I lose my house. I live in an apartment for a while, right? I can't pay the electric bill. I make a payment plan, because what we don't always realize when you're in the middle of the dark is that there's a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere.
Right. Right. And you were saying, like, we have, bankruptcy attorneys and
Yep.
like that also, so at the far end of the spectrum, like even to the point of, it just might be the way to go because everything else is so overwhelming that you can't deal with it, but you can always do it and then restart. Right. That's like Craig is saying, like there's that put the, hit the restart button, which you can do. And there are ways to do that and ways to be efficient about it and do it properly, where you can then, okay, I'm going to go to rock bottom, and then I'm, you got to be down to come back up, is the way I was always told.
Yeah, and the big thing is you got to be in a position where you're ready to make a change.
Yeah.
You don't want to live this way anymore. You're done with it. Because that's the motivator. What's going to motivate you to change your behavior? Because it's your behavioral issues a lot of times that cause these problems. And it's tough to change behavior unless you're motivated to do so.
Right. Absolutely. Change is difficult no matter what, but change becomes even more difficult when we're talking about our money and our finances.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. All right. So we're still trying to combat so, one of the things here is really, one of these things is making one financial decision at a time. Right. The problem with a lot of us is that we tend to try to, juggle all sorts of stuff, like Craig already talked about, all the stuff that's going on and everything. And I'm trying to do this and trying to do that. And if you're doing that, it can become daunting, but it also, that's how we can get ourselves in trouble. So it's more of this, like we talked about, trying to focus on one thing and making sure that one thing gets accomplished and then moving on to the next thing, because that's what's going to help in terms of dealing with it. And then, listen, if you've ever heard anything that we've done, we talk about planning, right? And Craig already mentioned to it, about having a plan, having a course of action, having a goal or a strategy to get you to the point, because that's what's going to help sort of give you that sense of, what to call it, power or like I'm in control. That's what I'm looking for. Right? Oh. I'm in control. Having a plan, a course of action is going to give you that sense of control of the situation. That's what you're looking for, because that's going to help ease a lot of that stress, because a lot of that stress is it just feels like I have no control. I'm just out there and there's nothing I can do about
Right. I mean, stress, like financial stress, is not different than any other type of stress, where the body's response is, fight or flight, right? Flight is, I'm just dropping everything. I'm not worrying about my bills, whatever. I'm not paying attention to it anymore. I'm putting my head in the sand. It's too much to deal with.
it.
Fight is maybe, well, I'm going to go spend money. Screw it, right?
Yeah, right. I'm throwing caution in the wind. The heck with it. That's it. I'm just going to keep.
Want to beat me? I'll just spend it first. Exactly. Both of those things are really just trying to deal to a reaction to a stressful event that you feel like you're out of control of. So, like you said, putting the brakes on a little bit. I mean, most of the people that we counsel don't even know what they spend where. They have a general idea, but they don't know, well, I'm spending that much on cable TV.
Right.
I'm spending that much on Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts.
Lunch or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. And that comes up. We talk about that as well in terms of dealing with it. Because that is one of the things, and we've sort of talked and alluded to this a little bit, right? But it really comes down to wants versus needs. Now, we do a whole thing on wants versus needs, right? The whole "give it to me now," Veruca Salt thing from Willy Wonka, right? I want it now, right? Type of thing. But you really need to be putting it into the need side, which Craig and I is the must pay, right? That's my bills. I got to pay my bills. Whether it's rent, mortgage, utilities, I got the debt that I have, I got to pay them. We talk about then setting up, we'll talk about budgeting in a second, then paying yourself. Then you get into the discretionary stuff, which is the wants. And, most of the people have the problem of spending to the wants without really dictating to the needs. And
so you're saying nobody compulsively pays their electric bill?
I would venture to guess that the electric company would tell you that is not the case, that they don't have people calling up and obsessively asking them can they pay this early? Right?
Buying extra power?
Yeah, well, I get an extra light on or two. Right? Is it something I can do that? But the idea is what happens is we fall into patterns. Right, just like we're talking about with the need for spending there to feel good or to make ourselves feel better, our spending does the same thing. Where we spend our money, and Craig mentioned this earlier about how we spend it, where we spend it, when we spend it, that falls into a pattern. And you really need to be taking a look at that to say, gee, we get towards the middle of the month where, hey, my second paycheck came in, I'm feeling flush. Now I go spend a lot. And then by the time I get to the end of the month, well, I got too much month here at the end of my money. So, what's going on? And so you need to be looking at those patterns, those habits, what you get yourself into to say, wait a minute, I need to be, reallocating, regulating, figuring out what I'm doing because I'm falling into this little trap that I don't even realize I've set myself into just because I do it based on when the paycheck is coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and the point in all this is a lot of people are stressed about money. Like, so there may be other factors that create that as a consequence, but most of the time that stress comes from having no control over it, right? And so the wants aren't even enjoyed because you're stressed about the needs. You're giving up the needs for the wants, and then you're not even enjoying that. So, we're not saying that people shouldn't enjoy their money. You shouldn't take a vacation. You shouldn't buy the new TV. What we're saying is it feels a lot better when you have those wants under control and you don't have to worry about spending money on the wants.
Right. And absolutely. And that comes right into, the last way really is about having a budget.
Yep.
Now this probably, as I've said, when we did it a couple of weeks ago, and you can check us out the YouTube channel to see it, budget and cash flow. If we had a house song, this would be it, right? It would be, budget and cash flow, because you really should not be spending until you know what you want to be saving. And then you can't be saving until you know what you are saving, until you know what you're spending.
I know, it's a tongue twister.
Yeah, I know. I give myself a little twisted there in terms of, but ultimately, until you know what you're spending, how are you doing anything? So you got to get that under control. I got to know where, like Craig said, you got to know where the money's going. You got to know what you're spending it on and how often you're spending it and where you're spending it. And yes, it might be going to lattes or it might be going to lunch out, or whatever the case may be, but you've got to get that and understand it. And then realize, well, maybe I can do some things to change how I'm spending this money and alter it so that I can be putting money away and building that emergency reserves or taking that vacation that I want to take or whatever the case may be. But until you get that under control, you're always going to be sort of out there with the unknown. And that's really where this comes into play is really taking control. And it's not easy. We know that. Like we said, making change is hard. Making change hard in your money behavior is extremely hard. And spending the time and going through and figuring out what you're doing as far as your budget and your spending is always that's a real hard look in the mirror, because we like spending, like Craig said, we like spending our money. We like feeling good about things and we like doing that.
And I deserve it.
Exactly. Feel like we deserve it. But until you get that under control, that's really where you're still going to always have that unknown tickling at the back of your head. That's going to be like, well, wait, this could be, and the stress thing comes in and then, we start all over again. So
this is another one too, Tom, that I get a lot from clients. Well, not from clients, more from prospects. I don't need to meet with you. I really don't have that much money to worry about. And I always come back with, look, if you have tons of money, you can make bigger mistakes. If you have, you're on a stricter budget or a fixed budget, you can't afford to make big mistakes. It's more important to have more control. Control your controllables, right? I can control what I spend. I can control, maybe I can't control my income at the moment, but I can control what I'm spending money on.
Right, and how I'm saving it. Controlling how I'm spending and how I'm saving.
Right, you have a finite amount of resources at any given time. How you're using those resources to get the most bang for your buck, per se. And I do the best with it I can.
And that brings us to, having a plan. Right? Failing to plan is planning to fail, right? Everybody has a plan. You just may not have a plan, right? Your plan is I'm just winging it as I go along and hoping, right, that everything works out. Hope is not a plan. So just so you're aware that hope does not work in terms of dealing with that. But if you've got questions, if you have concerns, if you have thoughts in terms of, how do I do some of this, or how do I create that debt reduction strategy or put a budget together, those type of things, that's why we're here. Reach out to us. If you want to, you can drop yes into the chat box. One of us will reach out to us, reach out to you, but we'll give you our contact information. We're always here to try to help you to sort of get through that.
Get a coach. Get a coach, right? All the best players have a coach. Don't try to do this alone.
Yeah, see, and he says that right as our picture shows up. This is us in our more formal attire. We're in our Red Sox jerseys this evening. These are custom. Granted, they're TB12 jerseys. We understand that, but just because nobody can get Mac Jones jerseys right now, so we don't have those. But that's us out and about and doing our more formal thing. One thing we ask of everybody, all of the audience, in terms of going through that, is that we're going to send you out an evaluation form, but Craig should be dropping a link into the chat box right now where you click on that. It takes you 2 minutes. We just like to get feedback from our audience, just to let you know, we do a lot of these for a lot of different organizations, community support groups, state agencies, that type of thing. And we just want to make sure we're staying topical and relevant and that you're getting something out of this. And speaking of which, what's on tap? We're staying with the Think with a Drink theme there. And next week, we are doing that emergency reserve account. Like, so the rainy day fund, the slush fund, whatever you want to call it, it's how do I set one up? Where do I set it up? And how much should be in it, basically, in terms of going through that. And then on the 21st, we're going to go towards Craig and I have a big affinity and do a lot of work in the special needs community. So these are 529A, they're ABLE accounts. And we're going to talk specifically about ABLE accounts and what they are and how they work and who can open them and how do you open them and do that type of thing.
And just a closing on financial stress, I've never met anybody who hadn't made financial mistakes. Anyone. Correct. Go up to somebody who you think is successful and ask them, what is your biggest financial mistake? And they'll tell you. So don't beat yourself up. Everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah, everybody does. Absolutely. It's a good point in terms of dealing with that. And so if you do have any questions, you can reach out to us. You can check the website out. Like we said, it's www.aresfoundation.org, or you can reach out to us at info@aresfoundation.org. We're happy to answer any questions, happy to try to help you out, see if we can set you up in any way and go through that. Craig, any other additional questions in the chat box?
That's all I've got in the chat box.
Okay, perfect. I certainly appreciate that. And on that note, I am going to
go watch the Sox.
Yes, go watch the Sox. Absolutely.